A lot of white nationalists are really upset about Somali immigration to Minnesota for some reason. But the thing is, Minnesota is the homeland of the Somali people, and it was promised to us 3,000 years ago. In fact, one of the founding documents of the state of Minnesota is literally codifying into law that Somali people have self-determination on that land. As it states very plainly in the basic law in Minnesota, the land of Minnesota is the historical homeland of the Somali people, in which the state of Minnesota was established. The state of Minnesota is the home of the Somali people, in which it fulfills its natural, cultural, religious, and historical right to self-determination. The right to exercise self-determination in the state of Minnesota is unique to the Somali people. The state views the development of Somali settlement as a national value and will act to encourage and promote its establishment and consolidation. So that's the end of the debate. The only people who have the right to self-determination in Minnesota are Somalis. Somalis have a cultural tie to the land. It was promised to us 3,000 years ago, and we have the right to go back to our homeland. If anybody wants to help me pay for Aliyah to my homeland, please help me out.
Boy. So we got to talk about what is quickly becoming the most important news story in the country, involving the Minneapolis Somali community that is currently running the Democrat Party.
All right, ready. Whoa, wait a minute. There, that's better.
And because they run the Democrat Party, the Democrats have allowed over $1 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse to run rampant in that community. A lot of that money ending up in the hands of al-Shabaab terrorists in Somalia. And stories like this are a Democrat's worst nightmare, is because it highlights the incompetency of Democrat governance and how they allow these groups to commit waste, fraud, and abuse with our taxpayer dollars in order to benefit Democrats. And this is why the Trump administration is currently cracking down on immigration, specifically when you're talking about the Somali community in Minneapolis, Minnesota. ICE has already showed up. They've already showed up, and they're doing their jobs. And that has the community in a full-blown panic.
Yeah, Bill, good morning to you. Federal agents are now on the ground in the Twin Cities, focusing on the Somali community and anyone who is in the country illegally. We know they have been stopping some folks out on the street asking for their IDs, also going door to door looking for specific individuals. All of this, as you mentioned, comes after those massive fraud schemes in Minnesota that involved mostly folks from the Somali community, fraudulently charging the state more than $1 billion for social services that were never performed.
I'm a citizen of this country, and they take me off and they hold me, they detain me here. I don't know what they're doing. I have no idea. These guys are so stupid. I don't know what they're talking.
They check what they want to see.
My passport. I give my ID. I give my passport ID. Everything. They didn't want to listen to me. They want to talk to their supervisors.
And you said they take interview. I don't know why they take interview here.
They asking me, have you been interviewed or what? I said, no, I haven't been interviewed. They said they're going to take interview, and soon as you come, they said it's going to be hot, so they just run off. They took it off. Because of you guys, they just they didn't want you to involve with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I get your name, or do you want to give that?
My name is Ali.
Can you spell it?
Ali. And last name Dahir.
Can I just ask how long you've been in the country?
Excuse me?
How long have you been in the country? I'm just curious.
Telling me what? 25 years.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, when the mainstream liberal media is actually forced to confront Ilhan Omar, who is a representative of the Somali community, and others about the fraud, of course, they don't really have an answer for why it was allowed to happen. And they also cry racism, hate, and bigotry, right? Because that's the only thing that they got at this point in response to these allegations is, well, you're racist if you call out the fact that we have welfare dollars being sent to al-Shabaab through a community in Minneapolis.
First of all, federal prosecutors say 59 people have been investigated in these schemes so far. Americans at large stole tens of billions of forms of aid during the pandemic all over the country. Minnesota's fraud scandal stands out, according to federal auditors. What are you hearing from investigators right now?
Well, I've been following the cases closely as they've gone through the courts, and we know that there are more indictments possibly coming. I think that number might go up to 73 is what I'm hearing.
Okay. Can you shed any light on why the fraud got so out of control in Minnesota?
I think what happened is that, you know, when you have these kind of new programs that are designed to help people, you're oftentimes relying on third parties to be able to facilitate. And I just think that a lot of the COVID programs that were set up, they were set up so quickly that a lot of the guardrails did not get created.
Now, obviously, whatever the ethnic group, the actions of a few dozen should not impugn an entire community of thousands of people.
And yes, folks have done, horrible things, and people have committed crimes, but we should not be pointing the entire community in one brush.
I heard that MDE took this step to really stop feeding the kids in the middle of pandemic. My office had to do something.
In the video, Osmond tells the room how he arranged a call with the MDE commissioner about their attempts to stop new meal sites.
But I'm one of those people that push back and call it what it is, which is racist tactics. I told her this money is actually from the federal. Your job is to distribute fairly to the communities that deserve.
At the time he delivered this speech, Osmond's wife, Ilo Amba, was in the middle of claiming to run a meal site of her own in this small office in downtown Minneapolis that the Minnesota Attorney General in this civil complaint calls a fraudulent shell company. Public records show Amba's nonprofit Urban Advantage Services received $460,000 in reimbursements between February and November 2021. The AG shut it down, citing participation in the meal fraud scheme. What's more, testimony and evidence in Bach's ongoing trial has shown Osmond and Amba signed over control of a different, dormant nonprofit they founded together called Stigma Free. Osmond writing to its new board, quote, "I have seen growth during the time that I have served, and I'm confident you will continue to grow this amazing organization in my absence." The men who took over Stigma Free are charged with using it immediately to rack up more than $13 million in meal fraud across the state.
Councilmember Osmond, you agreed to sit down with me and talk about this week.
Osmond never returned follow-up calls or texts.
Is Councilmember Jamal Osmond in the office today?
And could not be found to answer questions at City Council or at his home.
Yeah. So you see that, you heard that, okay? Ilhan Omar, when confronted about the fraud going on in her community, well, see, you know, there was just not a lot of oversight on the COVID funds, right? And that's why the fraud happened, right? It's just a lack of oversight, which, again, would be the fault of the Democrats, right? The people who are in charge of overseeing the funds, right? And then, you know, when these people are boohoo, whine, and cry racism, okay, like, for example, that Somali individual on CNN who was a part of one of these nonprofits that has been accused of fraud, right? Yeah, it's racism, hate, and bigotry, right? To ask questions about, hey, you know, there's a lot of sketchy stuff going on here, right? Meanwhile, on BS Now, you have the race hustlers claiming that President Trump's crackdown is white supremacy.
Clear, this is the first woman of color ever elected to represent her state in Congress, one of only 3 Muslim members of Congress serving right now. She was, I should also point out, that in the last election, she was given that office by more than 75% of the people who voted. The president has attacked e-initiatives. He's cut refugee admissions while prioritizing South Afrikaners. He denies, of course, that some American citizens were arrested by ICE because of the color of their skin. The statistics would suggest otherwise. Where is this going? This is only day, I think it's 317 of his presidency.
Chris, I mean, we have to be honest. Trump's immigration policy is a white nationalist agenda. It's part of a white nationalist agenda. I know people get upset with that, but it's true. I think we need to be very, very clear that that the idea is to make America white again. This is why I began with that nationalist conservatism movement, right? Because there's a belief that social cohesion isn't possible if you have immigration from all of these different groups. Now, mind you, we're talking about American citizens for the most part in this instance, but there's this sense that the browning of America, that these demographic shifts have to be arrested. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is not so much how do we defend Ilhan Omar from Trump's ridiculous rhetoric, but why are we stomaching or tolerating this from the President of the United States? This is blatant racist language, Chris. How is it that this is tolerable? That the President of the United States can describe American citizens as garbage. If you call Americans deplorable, all hell breaks loose. But what is going on here? At the heart of it, I think, is this clear idea that America has to remain a white republic. And if it's not, then we are going to hell. And so that came out of the mouth, I think, that vision came out of the mouth of the President of the United States. And we have to refuse that. And if we don't, what does that say about the country?
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. A classic deflection. Instead of addressing the fraud, instead of addressing why this happened, why this was allowed to happen, it's always the same old deflection of, well, this is white nationalism, white supremacy, racism, hate, bigotry. This is what they say. When they start screaming racism, hate, and bigotry, we got them, right? We got them. You know that you're over the target. You're over the target when they start screaming racism, hate, and bigotry, because they do not want to address the substance of what's going on here. Because addressing the substance means that you have to acknowledge that, yeah, there are real issues with this specific community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when it comes to fraud, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse. That's just the reality. This is why you have dozens and dozens and dozens of indictments and charges against these individuals, because it's a problem, right? And cracking down on the fraud doesn't mean just cracking down on immigration. It also means cracking down on the Democrat Party, because the Democrats allow this fraud, okay, because it benefits themselves. And there are questions about this. This is why the Trump administration and Congress, they're opening up investigations into Tim Walz, who is the governor of the state, Keith Ellis, who is the attorney general of the state, because allegedly they are taking in some campaign donations. They may be getting some kickbacks. They may be benefiting from the fraud that they allowed to happen on their watch.
President Trump and Republicans are railing against Governor Tim Walz, and the House Oversight Committee, which has launched its own investigation into the fraud, is now requesting documents, records, and communications from both Walz and State Attorney General Keith Ellison after reports they and other state officials may have been warned and ignored those warnings, allowing this fraud to happen.
The state employees in Minnesota rang the bell. They blew the whistle that there was massive fraud, and yet Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, apparently turned a blind eye to that for fear of political retaliation from the large voting bloc of Somalis.
Yeah, close to 80,000 Somalis live in Minnesota. They have become a powerful voting bloc for Democrats. But there are now multiple federal investigations into this fraud. Folks close to those cases tell us that what we've seen so far may be just the tip of the iceberg.
Hey, watching that.
Recently released audio recordings reveal conversations that happened between the Attorney General and individuals who were later implicated and in some cases convicted in the Feeding Our Future scandal. In those recordings, the Attorney General...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Masons 124, paragraph 1, in debate, members must confine remarks to questions before the body and avoid personalities. The debate here is not any individual. It is the policy and the amendment.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General was asked in those recordings to use his authority to protect businesses under investigation for wrongdoing, and rather than distance himself or remain neutral to allow the legal process to unfold, he responded in those recordings, "Of course, I'm here to help."
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, there was a point of order, and I didn't hear a ruling or any resolution of the point of order. Was there a resolution to it?
I'll remind the body that there was no ruling made by the Speaker as to the point of order that was just stated. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General in those recordings even urged the individuals, let's go fight these people. He was offered campaign contributions during that meeting, contributions that he later accepted. The release of those audio recordings raises questions about what's going on in the Attorney General's office that go directly to the need to pass the legislation that we had previously debated, House File 20. Although he has insisted that nothing came of the meeting, his office blocks disclosure of closed investigative
State your point
data.
of order.
Masons 124.
The A11 will help ensure that what happens behind closed doors in the Attorney General's office sees the light of day. We can protect people's privacy while shining a light on what the Attorney General's office is doing, who is influencing that office, whether it's those under a criminal investigation, nonprofits, corporations, or billionaires with political agendas, because Minnesotans have a right to know when their Attorney General's office is working with them. Minnesotans have a right to know whether the Attorney General is telling the truth, that nothing came of that meeting. That's why the A11 is so important.
I do want to ask you about the fraud scandal. I mean, because the president's comments seem at least in part fueled by, or he's talking about this fraud scandal that we mentioned earlier involving that charity called Feeding Our Future. The vast majority of these 70 defendants charged in the case were Somali. For perspective, those are nearly 80,000 Somalis in the state. How much, I mean, critics have said that state officials, including you and the governor, did not act fast enough or quickly enough to investigate charges of fraud against the Feeding Our Future and did little to flag their allegations to federal authorities. I know you said it was the federal government that didn't move fast enough. Is there something you wish you had done differently?
No, first of all, the Department of Education denied claims when questionable claims were made about these meals. My office went to court, explained that to the court. A judge actually found the department in contempt for denying claims. And we cooperated fully and worked well with the FBI. We're glad that we took the action that we did.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you have the local liberal news media trying to run defense on behalf of the Democrats and the Somali community here by claiming that, well, you don't understand. The Somalis contribute so much to the economy, except anybody with any basic math skills can understand that, you're not really saying what you think you're saying, right? Like what you're saying doesn't really convey the message that they think that it's conveying. So without further ado, let's actually listen to this news clip of the liberal media, the local news, trying to tell us about all the valuable contributions to the Minnesota economy that comes from the Somali community.
Tonight's top story. Sources tell ABC News that immigration efforts targeting Somali Minnesotans are underway in Minneapolis. President Trump's effort comes after he publicly questioned the community's contributions to the economy.
But new research shows Somali Minnesotans generate hundreds of millions in income and millions more in taxes. Kamaria Bray joins us live in Minneapolis with a look at the data.
Well, Kevin and Lindsay, we are at Hamdi Restaurant on East Lake Street. This is a Somali-owned business, and we talked to the owner who says he works very hard and pays his dues like many Somalis in the state, and he hopes that the president can recognize it. At Hamdi's Restaurant on East Lake Street, if it's not the smell of grilled meat that lures you in,
this is the rice.
It's the welcome of the owner.
We are working hard, family. We are working 7 days a week.
Abdi Shakur Elmi moved to Minnesota from Somalia in the 90s. He and his family have run the restaurant for decades.
Like me and my dad, we work very hard every single day.
And it's their labor that's being questioned by the President of the United States.
These are people that work, they contribute nothing.
But that contradicts the research from Concordia University's economist, Dr. Bruce Corey.
I can share that information with him and he probably change his mind.
According to his research, Somali income is at least $500 million in Minnesota. They pay $67 million annually in state and local taxes.
Wait. Hold on. So the Somali community apparently contributes $500 million in income, right? And pay about $67 million in state and local taxes. However, we're talking about over $1 billion in fraud, right? $1 billion in fraud, right? To me, that the math ain't math in here, right? When you talk about just state and local taxes, $67 million a year, it's gonna be a long time before we get back those welfare funds, right? That $1 billion+ in welfare that allegedly went to Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Yeah, I don't think 67 million is making up for that, right? I'm not sure if it's making up for that. Also, on top of that, you have to consider this, which is really going to blow your mind, right? And expose all of this for what it really is, okay? The total Somali Minnesotan community is 86,000 people. You talk about a total annual earned income, revenue generated, okay, according to that news clip that we just watched, 500 million. That means that per person, the annual earned income is $5,814. Then when we look at the average Minnesota resident, you have 5,740,000 people. When you talk about total annual earned income, 390 billion total. That means that per person, it's 68,000 per person. Somali income is 8.5% of the nationwide average, which should tell you everything you need to know, okay? When you break it down by tax revenue, right, you're talking about $67 million in generated taxes, right? Tax revenue from the Somali community. 86,000 people. That comes down to about $779 per Somali. That's how much they contribute from a tax perspective. Okay? In tax revenue. Not even $800, not even $1,000 a person. Now, again, when you look at welfare and fraud, I don't think the math is mathed here, right? I don't think that the news media is making the point that they think that they're making here, right? I think they're actually kind of proving a point that they desperately don't want to make, right? They're actually proving the point that they're trying to disprove, okay? So, again, when you look at the fact that statistically speaking, compared to the rest of the state, I mean, you're talking about the Somali population, 58% poverty, 42% food stamps, 40% unemployed, no high school education, 41%, but billions in waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, you know, maybe the media, again, they should just sit this out, right? Just understand that you're not going to win this conversation, okay? The math, the facts, the evidence is just not on your side, right? Just focus on cleaning up the fraud, right? Focus on the fact that this is happening, acknowledge it for what it is, and take your L, right? Take your L. But because they refuse to take the L, because they want to cry racism, hate, and bigotry as a deflection, is only getting worse, right? It's only getting worse. And that is what's happening at this point. So, you know, again, I just find this story to be fascinating. It is one of those stories that is a Democrat's worst nightmare. I think it really highlights all of the issues with Democrat governance and how they simply don't care about this waste, fraud, and abuse because they benefit from it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they benefit, and this is why it's allowed to happen. And when you call it out, this is why they get so upset, because it really is a threat to their power and control. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.